Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're going to have a look at the lore of death, which is, according to some fragments of the core book, the only lore that Slayers made use of before the fall. Now, Michael's curse addressed to the rebels of the Seventh House and other demon books, such as The Storyteller's Companion and Houses of the Fallen, make it very clear that they were also known as the House of the Second World before the fall, since they were working at the behest of the Giver on a very discreet project known as the Second World. During the Age of Wrath, Slayers created the lore of Spirit to anchor the souls of their beloved mortals to earthly things and thus prevent them from being taken by the host. This was not enough to stop the depredations of loyalist Slayers, so the rebels created a haven, a second realm, where the souls of their mortals would be safe and hidden. This was but a shadow of the real second world they'd worked on before the fall, and this new realm of theirs does go on to become an eternal prison for the souls of their loyal humans. But that is a story for another time. Today we're talking about the Slayer's very first duty, to gently deliver death and decay, transforming matter and returning it to the cycle of rebirth. A word of warning, we will be talking about a lot of death in this episode. I'm going to do my best not to be too descriptive. Regardless, if it becomes too much, take a break or even sit this one out. The Slayer's duty is heartbreakingly difficult and so shameful or emotionally painful that some of them even deny belonging to this house and they abandon their duty. In light of that, let's read some evocations. Read Fate. This evocation allows the demon to look into the eyes of a dead body and see the manner in which he or she died. System. Roll perception plus awareness. The number of successes achieved determines the amount of detail your character can determine about the mortal's fate. One success provides a picture of the moment of death. Each additional success goes back further in time, from minutes at 2 successes, hours at 3, and days at 4. It also provides a broader context for the circumstances behind the person's passing. Torment. Monstrous demons are able to discern a subject's fate only if that person died as the result of violence, whether accidental or intentional. My very first thought after reading this evocation is, why can Slayers only read a human's last moments? I mean, their original duty excluded mankind completely. Only vegetal, animal, and, well, inorganic matter fell under the purview of the Slayer's responsibilities. Now, I have a feeling you're going to say, yes, but only humans became fully aware of their mortality, and after the fall, they've often had to endure death alone without the gentle touch of a Slayer. Fair, very fair, and it makes sense that an evocation like this was developed after the fall, precisely so the Slayer can see a little too late how a mortal died in their absence. However, it doesn't really make sense with this evocation being, the initiation, the first step to mastering this lore, if it was only developed after the fall and thus only used on mortals. We know from the books, death is the Slayer's first duty ever, and it precedes even the creation of mankind. To reflect this, I would say using this power on the remains of beasts can also work, though maybe it requires more successes or it's done at a higher difficulty. What would be the narrative consequences of using it like this? Well, Slayers might obtain information from more diverse sources and won't always have to break into the morgue or be present on a crime scene to figure out what happened, which can lead to very interesting and creative uses. Speaking of crime scenes, I think witnessing the terror and possibly the agony of a poor mortal who died alone as a result of violence is definitely a reminder that no Slayer was on the job at that time, and also that such horrible deaths are the result of their rebellion and their curse. So I really like the High Torment version. In our games, a point of torment is gained every time the Slayer observes a horrible, violent fate. Isn't that a bit harsh on the players? Not at all, because a death is always accompanied by signs of what might have caused it, even though in some instances the signs aren't immediately visible and revealing them requires certain tests. In the case of violent, bloody deaths, they are visible, they really are. So the player knows what they're getting into, though sometimes it's going to be the character's only way of getting information and maybe preventing a wave of future deaths. For storytellers, this one is a very powerful narrative tool when it comes to introducing antagonists. Imagine a Slayer character using this evocation to witness someone's final moments. In that vision, they see a strange man with a huge grin on his face looking straight into the eyes of the victim, holding up A4 pages with written text on them, somehow like they know they're in front of a camera. The pages read, "Everyone you've ever loved and all those you will ever love will die by my hand. This is the price of betraying our legion." Shortly after flipping through the pages in front of the living camera, the grinning man takes a knife to the victim's throat. Now, depending on legacy background, your protagonist might actually remember someone they betrayed millennia ago, intentionally or by accident, or they might not have a clue who this person or the fallen possessing them is. On the other hand, maybe someone who is unable to properly dispose of a body will still remove the eyes, knowing that the Slayer can easily find out what they did. So mechanically and narratively, I love this evocation. It's got weight to it, it's got depth, but I am having a hard time figuring out how it might have worked before the fall. Next dot, Decay. One of the Reaper's primary powers, this evocation accelerates the process of decay, reducing living and non-living matter to its component particles. System. Your Slayer must be able to touch his intended target to perform this evocation. Roll stamina plus medicine. Each success inflicts 1 health level of aggravated damage, lethal damage to a mortal. If performed on a dead body, each success removes a point from the body's stamina. When all of the dots have been eliminated, the body is reduced to dust. The process works in a similar fashion on inanimate objects, but the difficulty varies depending on an object's composition. Decaying an article of wood or cloth, for example, is difficulty 7, while decaying a piece of plastic is difficulty 8. Decaying metal is difficulty 9 and stone is 10. Each success decays 1 cubic foot of material. Torment. Monstrous demons affect people and objects in an area as opposed to single targets. Everything within a radius of yards equal to the character's faith score is affected. Love this one as well, but I think the word choice here might be a little confusing when it says they accelerate the process of decay. Well, someone on Reddit pointed out vampires don't age or decay naturally, so does that mean they are immune to this? My personal answer would be no. I think decay isn't only something a Slayer accelerates, but they can also induce or inflict. This evocation is fantastic, really, not only because a Slayer can make bodies vanish, but because they can decay or break down pretty much anything, which can be used in a very wide range of situations. You can pat someone on the shoulder and say, "Oh, you're the best," and a few seconds later, their clothes just rot off of them, leaving them naked in the street. You can briefly ask for a taste of someone's food, touching it and triggering a delayed process of decay, which results in indigestion or poisoning, as the dish tastes great, maybe a bit fermented, but is absolutely rotten by the time it reaches the target's stomach. You can decay handcuffs and other such restraints, even though it's a lengthy, difficult process, but it can be done. Or, of course, you can simply necrotize a living target, 1 health level of aggravated damage at a time. Goes without saying, the high torment power is just gruesome, and it affects everything around the Slayer based on their faith, not their torment. So low torment characters, if desperate enough, maybe surrounded by attackers and unable to escape, they might just resort to using this. In light of this, tormented Slayers are very scary and very deadly antagonists. Next dot. Vision of Mortality. This evocation saw frequent use in the War of Wrath, permitting Slayers to fill the minds of their foes with visions of impending death. Even battle-hardened angels found their mettle sorely tested by these bone-chilling sights, throwing down their arms and fleeing before the Halaku's remorseless advance. System: Role manipulation plus intuition. The target resists the evocation with a willpower roll using the Slayer's faith as difficulty. If you succeed, the target abandons her actions and flees from your demon's presence. If the target's willpower roll botches, he flees and suffers a temporary derangement. The evocation can target individuals up to a number of yards away equal to your character's faith rating. A target who wins the resisted roll cannot be subjected to this evocation again for the remainder of the scene. Torment. Monstrous demons affect every living being around them as opposed to a specific target. The demon affects targets within a number of yards equal to their faith score, and resisted willpower rolls are made for each potential victim. Flat out, this is bad. I love what the evocation does from the storytelling perspective, but the mechanics don't help at all. Using the Slayer's faith as difficulty on a resisted willpower roll means that only extremely powerful Slayers are going to be able to use this power successfully, and it can even fail when used on mortals who have a willpower of 2. I mean, most characters start off with a faith rating of 3. You really don't want that to be the difficulty of a resist roll. Also, I can understand mortal targets fleeing under the terror of a vision of death, but what about the fallen? Demons are supposed to be immune to any supernatural fear effects, rules as written, and if this doesn't sound like a supernatural fear effect, I don't know what does. This is one issue. The second issue, to say even battle-hardened angels fled the fight, is just silly, because the Elohim don't die. They are not subject to the cycle of life and death, rather they are eternal beings that can only be imprisoned or somehow disabled for eternity, undone by their true name, or they can be devoured by other fallen. In light of that, as written, this evocation is not great. So to actually make it work with the least amount of changes in our games, we agreed that the willpower resist roll is a solid difficulty 6. Mortals who fail do indeed flee immediately, but fallen who fail the resist roll take a dice pool penalty of -1 for each of the Slayer's successes, as they are plagued by visions of battle and death that make it impossible to concentrate on the task at hand. Thus, a demon who is the target of such visions can choose to flee or stay and fight even with a disadvantage. Next dot. Extinguish life. The Reaper's touch means death. By placing a hand on a living body and exerting her will, a demon can sever a victim's soul from his body, killing him instantly. This capability can be used on the fallen as well, but rather than cause instant death, the evocation produces an icy chill that saps the vitality from a demon's body. System: the Slayer must be able to physically touch her intended target to perform this evocation. Spend 1 faith point and roll strength plus awareness. Compare your successes to the target's stamina. If your successes exceed the target's stamina, he is killed instantly. If your successes are less than the target's stamina, each one inflicts a level of bashing damage, as the Slayer's icy touch saps the strength from the mortal's body. If this evocation is employed against another demon and the successes exceed the target's stamina, each success inflicts a level of aggravated damage. If the successes are less than the demon's stamina, apply them as levels of bashing damage. Torment. Monstrous demons do not need to touch their victims to employ this evocation. Their icy hatred radiates from them in all directions, stilling the hearts of living beings. The high torment version of this evocation affects every living being within a number of yards equal to your character's faith score. I like this evocation and I think it makes a lot of sense for the most part, but I don't particularly enjoy the fact that if the successes don't exceed stamina, the damage is bashing for demons. I think it should have been lethal when used on other fallen. I mean, come on, the second dot evocation, Decay, allows you to just rot anything out of existence with aggravated damage, and this evocation, which also requires the expenditure of a faith point, does pretty much nothing unless the Slayer scores more successes than the target's stamina. I'm saying this because according to the rules, for the Fallen, all bashing damage can be healed within 1 round by spending 1 faith point. Literally, all bashing damage, even if you are at crippled health level, which makes this power either pretty good or completely useless. The redeeming factor is that the number of successes rolled are not soaked. Instead, they are directly applied as damage to health levels. Still, I think lethal damage would have been the way to go, since the results are already very much up to the dice. Final dot. Unlife. This powerful evocation allows a living body to function without the presence of a soul or vital spirit, creating an unliving creature completely under the Slayer's control. System: spend 1 faith point and roll stamina plus medicine. A walking dead creature has only 1 point in each of its physical attributes upon creation, though each extra success can be used to add additional points in any physical attributes at your discretion. These creatures do not suffer wound penalties in combat, using their full dice pools at all times. They must suffer no less than 10 health levels of damage before being destroyed. Undead minions are mindless automatons acting solely according to your demon's will. Each time your character wants one of her minions to perform an action, make a willpower roll difficulty 7. If your character controls more than 1 creature at a time, you must divide your willpower pool among them per turn. A failed roll causes a zombie to continue the last action it was commanded to perform. Alternatively, a Slayer can program a minion to perform a rote set of instructions, 1 action per point of wits that your character has, all by spending a temporary willpower point. Since these instructions are transmitted mentally, it's possible to create a detailed set of commands including complicated travel routes and detailed physical descriptions. Once programmed, however, a minion cannot be given further commands. If the demon uses her willpower to command the minion to perform an action outside the realm of its instructions, its programming is lost. Slayers can raise and control a number of minions equal to their faith at one time. The bodies must be within faith in yards to be affected. The effects of this evocation last for the duration of the scene. If your character wishes, the effects can be made permanent by the expenditure of a temporary willpower point per body. A permanent minion remains until destroyed and it cannot be raised again thereafter. Disembodied Fallen may possess animated corpses with the Slayer's permission, or they can try to wrest control of the programmed corpses from the demon with a resisted willpower roll. Unless transformed by the use of other lore, a demon's host remains a dead body with all due appearances, smell, and physical limitations. Torment. Monstrous demons cannot prevent their torment from infusing creations with an unnatural craving for violence, raising flesh-eating monsters that must be held in check constantly, or they attack any living thing they can reach, including the Slayer herself. If not programmed with a rote set of instructions, these creatures go into a violent frenzy unless their creator makes a successful willpower roll, difficulty 8, each turn. This willpower roll is in addition to any to impose commandments from action to action. Nice. Mechanically, it's very similar to the Lore of Awakening's Restore Life evocation, except this evocation doesn't really bring the body back to life, which means it won't require any nourishment or maintenance. Multiple zombies can be raised at the same time, which is lovely. The effect can be made permanent, and they have 10 health levels and exist until destroyed. I really like this one because I think it shows just how important and powerful Slayers are when they can simply decide that someone's physical remains haven't outlived their usefulness and will not rejoin the cycle just yet, but will be put to a different use. Alright, let's have a look at the apocalyptic form next. Namtar, the Visage of Death. These angels manifest as shadowy figures wreathed in tendrils of ghostly mist that shift and writhe from moment to moment, occasionally reflecting the angels' thoughts in strange symbolic forms. A pall of silence surrounds these figures, and their feet never seem to touch the ground. Their skin is as pale as alabaster, and their faces are constantly hidden in deep shadow. The Visage of Death confers the following special capabilities. Wings. A pair of raven's wings extends from the character's shoulders. At full extension, each wing is a third again as long as the character is tall. The character can glide up to 3 times her running speed per turn. Improved initiative. Add 2 to the character's initiative. Pass without trace. The difficulties of the character's stealth rolls decrease by 2, and her passage does not disturb the surrounding environment in any way. She leaves no footprints and disturbs no foliage. Casts no reflection. The demon's image does not appear in a mirror, nor can it be captured in a photograph or by a video camera. Torment. Monstrous Namtar exude the cold aura of death, indiscriminately draining the life of every living thing around them. Flowers wilt in their passing, children grow glassy-eyed, and the old feel mortality grip their heart. The Visage of Death confers the following high torment special capabilities. Cloak of Shadows. The demon is shrouded in a pall of darkness, making her features difficult to see in the best of light, and rendering her near invisible at night. The difficulties of all stealth rolls are lowered by 2 whenever the demon stands in a pool of shadow or moves in darkness. If the character is attacked, the rules for blind fighting apply to the attacker. Death Grip. The demon's spirit can cling to life past the point of human endurance. If the demon's host body suffers 8 levels of lethal or aggravated damage, she can still hold on to life with a successful willpower roll. If successful, the character falls into a coma until the following dawn, at which point she rises with 1 health level and 1 less temporary faith. Aura of Entropy. Plants wilt in the demon's presence, and living beings are suffused with an icy chill that saps their strength. Mortals and other demons within a number of yards equal to the demon's faith lose 1 die from their dice pools unless a successful stamina roll, difficulty 6, is made. The effects of this capability persist for the duration of the scene. Damage resistance. The demon is capable of shrugging off damage that would cripple a normal human. She may ignore any wound penalties for the duration of the scene. Penalties for injuries incurred while in apocalyptic form apply again once human form is resumed. Where do I even begin? I think the description is beautiful, though it's somewhat classic. Raven wings always give this house away, so I would only show that particular form feature if I'm fully ready to be known as a slayer, as an angel of death, to my fellow fallen. Cast no reflection coupled with pass without trace, really nice, since we can imagine slayers will be spending at least some time around hospitals, morgues, or other such places that have surveillance. Out of the high torment powers, damage resistance is fantastic because sometimes it is the wound penalties that actively prevent a character from fleeing and surviving a nasty encounter. Cloak of Shadows allows the character to either ambush someone or run and hide should they attempt to do so. And finally, Death Grip is something that will always keep your character in the game should they die as a result of a bleeding effect or, pretty much any effect that goes only one health level over 7. This also applies to aggravated damage, so this effect can be very powerful, but it depends a lot on luck. I would also rule that effects that don't destroy the body further after it clearly shut down are also the kind of deaths that a slayer might come back from. Anything that is caused by asphyxiation and anoxia, certain poisons, or various similar things. But yeah, being torn to shreds by a werewolf is probably not covered by this form power. So there we have it, the lore of death. Evocations that seem very straightforward at first, delivering death and decay, but can be used to create very complex moods, scenes, and stories. Given that this lore bears a weight and an obligation that was imposed on the Slayers by their own rebellion, I really love how the game encourages players to decide on how the character feels about this duty themselves. You can play a Slayer who absolutely detests using this lore, even though it's their primary lore and it is who they are, just as well as you can play one who uses it with complete disregard for life and the Wheel of Rebirth, or one who is still loyal to the job and performs their duty with compassion and stoicism. I really like this lore, though I think personally I would have a very difficult time not revisiting real-life experiences while playing the character, and maybe unwillingly inserting too much of myself. I've never played a Slayer, but I can't wait to try it. It is astounding just how much pain and shame and guilt all of the houses have to live with, but I think none of them reveal this better than the 7th house. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, enjoy every moment, and don't forget to play.